For today's news, as you can expect, more thing on the COVID-19 virus. A big domestic story is that our Senate approved a $2 trillion economic stimulus package yesterday. It's hard to even imagine what $2 trillion is. Now, it still isn't official yet. The House has to pass it, and then the president needs to sign it. That's expected to all happen by sometime tomorrow. What does this aid package mean? Well, there's lots of parts to it, but how it might help the average American is that if you make under $75,000, you can receive $1,200, which they expect to get in about 3 weeks, plus $500 per child. So hopefully that may help some families. It also gives benefits to people that normally don't see benefits if you work gigs or freelance, things like that. Also gives more loans to small businesses, extends unemployment benefits by, I think, 13 weeks longer than normal. The unemployment numbers are supposed to be coming out today, and they expect them to soar. So though the stock market came up a bit yesterday with these packages going through, that might make it take another hit. We'll see. There's also information here about the hospitals in New York and New Orleans, where it's hit pretty badly, struggling. I know one hospital in New York City yesterday faced 13 deaths alone. So here is our US map. I know every day we look. Here's the world map. So a bit more countries in this dark orange area, which are at least 100 new cases a day for the past 7 days. Like I said, the markets did come up a little bit yesterday, but we'll see how those unemployment numbers affect it today. And then more photos. Has anyone seen the international webcams yet, or the Times Square webcams? So, of course, more articles about it. What do students who are homeless or don't have the internet do for this virtual learning? I know my students' school has provided, some cable providers have provided hotspots for those students near their homes, but I know that doesn't always help every single person. Right, I mentioned Louisiana before, or New Orleans. This says Louisiana may be experiencing the fastest growth now. Things you can do about the coronavirus. So I know many of you have been doing this already, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to check it out. Testing, so how's that going? Iran, which wasn't a country hit hard by it. Thousands of Afghans or Afghanistan returning each day bring a risk of widespread infections to a country with little capacity to test for or treat COVID-19. Maybe we'll do some geography next week on where these places are, in case you've forgotten. Here we go. So we're going to next week compare and contrast some news sources and how they cover this. But I just wanted to stick with the New York Times to be something familiar with you guys for now. Hey, look at this. Here's a list of great theater, dance, and classical music to tune into while stuck at home. Not a bad idea. Let me know if you listen to any of it. Speaking of dance, my kids started online dance this week for their classes. Anyone else doing anything like that? I'd love to hear about other virtual learning you guys are doing besides school. All right, so we'll see what tomorrow's news brings. Now we'll go on to our Women's History Month segment. For today's Women's History Month segment, we'll be featuring Julie-Victoire Daubié. As you listen, think about which STEM values she exemplified. So she was from France, and she was a journalist, and she studied many things with her brothers when she was younger. A lot of things in the social sciences, like history, Latin, and actually even zoology. Now, she was the first woman to graduate from a university in France, and she did so by entering an essay competition. Now, at this time, there was no law that forbade women from going to colleges, but it was just the social norm. So she would apply and apply and apply. but she would be rejected each time until finally she wrote this essay, The Poor Woman in the 19th Century, Female Conditions and Resources. So my punctuation there is incorrect, my apologies. But this was basically a 300-page essay about the inequality of women in France at the time. Now, keep in mind, this is during the Industrial Revolution. We haven't gotten there yet. We will very shortly. But this is about how, especially now as working conditions have changed, women are still facing equality and maybe in some cases even more inequality. Now, unfortunately, she died by the age of 50 of tuberculosis, which we'll talk about as well when we start the Industrial Revolution just next week. So I wanted to share a little bit with you about her essay. And unfortunately, I could not find anything but the French version online last night. Now, I didn't read all 300 pages because my French is a little rusty, but hey, like, what do we have to do right now? So I tried to read a little bit of it last night, and a lot of it was about how women make much less than men do at factory work. That was common now. They were doing the same things in the factories, but women wouldn't make as much. How they're not learning the same things with what education they do receive when they're younger, how there are so many more male apprentices versus female apprentices, when in this type of economy it makes sense for both genders to be apprentices in different lines of employment. So this passage here, I put up about the abandonment of the woman and how many of them were committing suicide because of their conditions. And then she gives you 3 examples. This woman here, Finatra, she jumps out of a window, empoisonnant. This woman here takes poison and kills herself. And actually, right after this, there was a passage about an orphan who could not find a place to take her in and for a job, and she committed suicide by drinking vinegar and pepper. Don't do that. I don't know what that's a thing, but it's a sad story. And then also another woman here that says, like, and it made me think of, what's going on in the world today, that after being unemployed for 15 days because of a malady, she was sick, that it exhausted all of her resources, and she'd have no way to keep herself, economically sound, and sadly committed suicide. So she wrote about these things to be like, this is not right. Women should not be killing themselves because the economy is not supporting them the way they should be, because women are playing an equal part in the factories and in other places of employment. So as you can see, it was such a good piece that's why she was accepted to university. And for the remainder of her life, she continued to fight for women's rights and women's equality. Now, before we leave today, I did want to share that today is also Robert Frost's birthday. He was an American poet that first became famous in England. He was born on this day in 1874. He wrote many famous poems, but in 1920, he wrote one called Fire and Ice. Now, there's some different theories about this poem. Some say it has to do with Dante's Inferno. Others say because it was written in 1920, right after World War I ended. And remember, World War I devastated the planet. Millions were killed. Many had their lives destroyed. This was also during the 1918 flu pandemic that also devastated many people. And the third idea sort of brings out the space nerd in me. They think that it was inspired by a conversation he had with an astronomer on how will the sun cease to exist? Will it explode or implode? I also think this poem, with all that's going on in the world now, is somewhat, for good or bad, relevant. Now, when I was in 8th grade, my English teacher, Mrs. McDonald, had us memorize this poem. And to this day, I still have it memorized. So whenever you wonder, will you remember some of this stuff you learn in the class? I hope me remembering this poem is evidence that yes, you will remember some of this, especially this year, I think, right? Some say the earth will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and will suffice. Stay well, Bulldogs.